The last section of Chapter 7 focuses on our body's immune responses. And we have three kind of categories of immune response, and these are largely triggered by our lymphatic system or performed by our lymphatic system. So we've got innate immunity, adaptive immunity, and acquired immunity. Innate immunity is kind of the body's first form of defense, and these include the body's physical and chemical barriers that are already present in other body systems that just work to prevent pathogens from entering the body at all. It's like our first line of defense. If a pathogen never enters the body, if it never gets in, the body won't have to stimulate an additional immune response at all to fight off a pathogen. So this is our way of kind of heading it off before it becomes a problem. These can include things like the skin of our integumentary system, so that hard keratinization process, making the skin unpenetrable to the majority of things from the outside, basically protects the largest surface area of our body. We also have things like mucous membranes in our eyes and our nasal cavities, and that's going to hopefully trap things before they're even able to get into the body. Our tears produce antibacterial enzymes like lysozyme, because that's another big part of our body that's exposed to the outside. And anytime we have an exposed area where things can get in, that's a potential for or site of infection. And so that antibacterial property of our tears heads off any bacteria that might be able to get in through that opening. Stomach acid, which is obviously beneficial to us in breaking down the foods that we eat, is also going to, as a kind of a side effect, kill any microbes that are able to get in traveling on our food. And then we have the inflammatory response, which we will look at in more detail. You'll actually stimulate the inflammatory response in your lab for this week. So kind of to demonstrate one of your body's innate immune responses. So the inflammatory response includes also elements of the integumentary system and the cardiovascular system. And when you are performing this part of your lab, what you won't be able to see is the role that your lymphatic system also plays. The inflammatory response is our second line of defense, and it's activated when a pathogen already makes it past some of those physical barriers that we saw, the skin, our mucous membranes, things like that. And we experience inflammation typically as redness, heat, swelling, and pain. Those are like the symptoms of the inflammation response. And the redness is caused by increased blood flow to that affected area or site of the pathogen invasion. So those smooth muscles contract and allow more blood to be sent to that area of the body. And that's because blood is going to contain those macrophages. And we want those macrophages, those white blood cells, to, if we need to, be able to undergo that process of phagocytosis and basically eat up anything that's coming in to cause us harm. And that will also serve to kind of heat up the area and that heat will inhibit the growth and replication of a lot of bacteria. The swelling is caused by that increased flow of fluid to the area, and then the pain is caused by the swollen tissue pressing on any surrounding nerves in that region. The inflammation response is really quick to begin and also really quick to go away. So once the irritation or invader has been dealt with, you'll see in your lab when you perform that the symptoms go away very, very quickly. And when you do it, you'll likely use a pencil eraser or something like that. That's a pretty minor irritation. But if you have a more major irritation, the inflammation response will last longer to ensure that everything is dealt with. But goes away very, very fast after the infection clears. Our adaptive immune response, these are things that are developed by a person after they're already exposed to a particular pathogen. And these are driven by specialized lymphocytes called T cells and B cells. And these cells are capable of identifying antigens, which are on the protein structures embedded in the membranes of bacteria, viruses, molds, and like parasitic worms, anything that's going to be foreign to our body. Those T cells and B cells learn to identify the antigen after the pathogen has entered the body. And once B cells, B as in boy, have identified a new antigen, the body will create memory B cells that retain that ability to identify that antigen. And that's how we develop things like long-term immunity. Once we're exposed to something, our body has this mechanism of creating those memory cells so that we are able to remember that next time. And if we were to be invaded again by that exact same bacteria or that exact same virus, we would already know how to handle that, and we wouldn't have to get sick again and experience the symptoms of that infection to be able to deal with it. We would have developed adaptive immunity and the ability to mark those cells more quickly for destruction. Through science and that all-important scientific method, humans have developed this ability to acquire immunity, and that's through the use of immunizations or vaccines. So this is essentially teaching our body how to make those antibodies without ever having to be exposed to that virus at all, or basically without having to get sick. So we can be exposed to just the antibodies, just the antigens. Sometimes vaccines will contain a bunch of antigens that were made from the live virus or the live bacteria. Sometimes vaccines will contain dead forms of that virus or dead forms of that bacteria, and basically the antibodies are still attached to those dead viruses, and our bodies are able to identify those cells, but they're not able to make us sick. And then, as we're seeing right now, the new messenger RNA vaccines that we're seeing for the COVID vaccines. And when we get to our unit on transcription and translation, we're going to talk a lot more about messenger RNA, and we'll really get to see how is that training our body to be able to make these proteins. It's fascinating. I got the Pfizer shot, so my messenger RNA was working. Okay. So here are some thought questions for the lymphatic system. Just like all of the other chapters, I'm not going to go through these questions on the video, but as you're looking through them and kind of jotting down your notes to some of those answers, if you have questions or want to discuss any of them in more detail, let me know. I'd love to hear from you.